Hello, I am Dan Smith, and today we have a special interview with two time travelers, Connor and Van. They just got back to the present a few days ago. They have a special interest in 19th century realism. They're here to tell us what they learned about realism from their experiences in the 19th century and how history played a part in the development of American realism. Let's turn the time over to the interview. So, Van, what new technology was brought up in the realism period?
Well, back in the Realism period when I traveled, the telegraph and the telephone were two crucial inventions that affected journalism, banking, and diplomacy. The improved communication enabled the country to industrialize in the West and in other areas. It was incredible. These areas previously did not have industry. Another crucial invention was the light bulb in the 1880.
Okay, so how was the country able to expand west?
I remember the gold rush and other opportunities sparked much interest from Americans in the East and immigrants. So this created a need for a way to gain access to the West. This is where railroads, telegraph lines, and oil pipelines came into play. The Transcontinental Railroad made it possible for folks to cross the entire country in little more than a week.
What novel from that time period shows how crucial technology was?
I remember a novel that I read related to technology was The Luck of Roaring Camp by Bret Harte. This author explained the difficult realities of danger and that danger that led to death in the gold mining camps of California. The gold rush was made possible by technology.
Were there any major conflicts between the Civil War and the end of the 19th century?
You know what, Dan? No. This time period was a time of relative peace in the country. There was only minor Indian conflicts.
How big of an impact did the Civil War have on American citizens?
As you may know, the Civil War is the bloodiest war in American history. Several fellow family members died, which impacted the way Americans thought of the war. One key component of the war was the new presence of photography. Photographers captured gruesome, horrifying pictures of dead bodies after major battles. This truly showed the realities of war.
How did the gruesome images available to the public affect American literature?
It led a transition from the Romanticism period to the Realism period. Romanticism blurred out what life is really about. It made life seem like everything was a fairy tale and has a happy ending. The Civil War really brought America out of that time period and into a time period of realistic expectations and views that helped transition into Realism period.
So, Connor, how did the country change socially during the westward expansion?
Well, as more people moved westward, the western frontier really disappeared because of the presence of people throughout the continent. There weren't huge gaps in the country anymore. As this change occurred, there was an increased concentration of people, political power, and economic activity in urban areas. One eye-opening statistic is in 1860. There was 9 cities with populations of over 100,000 people, and by 1910 there were 50 of them.
Well, how did the population change affect farming in America?
Well, by 1910, the number of Americans involved in farm labor dropped by a third. Not as much farm labor was needed because of the advancement of agricultural technology. Also, the rise of industrialism caused people to move into urban areas to work in industrial settings like factories. With intense urbanization, disease was a common factor. Did you know that the first 12 presidents of the U.S. have all been born into farming communities, but between 1865 and 1912, the presidency was filled by men with backgrounds of representing businesses and cities. Cities responded to the sudden growth of people by paving streets, digging sewers, sanitizing water, constructing housing, and creating public transportation systems. European immigrants were a large part of the industrial workforce and helped develop the West as well.
Connor, that's some interesting stuff. Now tell me, how did the government respond to these changes?
Well, not really well actually. The government became very corrupt, especially at the local levels. The general public was worried about the now corrupt government and the growing power of large businesses throughout the country. Mark Twain described the period of the late 19th century as the Gilded Age, a period of dramatic expansion of American wealth and prosperity, underscored by the mass corruption in the government. Because of the corruption, the Panic of 1893.
Wow, Connor, and those are some crazy events. Can you tell us about some forms of American literature from the Realism period that was affected by these events?
Yeah, actually, I read these two books recently written by William D. Howells that show his personal opinion on society, government, and economics. I could tell that he really represented the attitudes of many American people from that time. The two books were Annie Kilburn and A Hazard of New Fortunes. Another author I really feel represented the American people was Upton Sinclair, the novel called The Jungle. This novel criticized U.S. economic and political life and urged socialism as the remedy. My personal favorite is Man with the Hoe, which truly showed how poor industrial workers lived. I noticed that Americans really related to the book and stimulated nationwide interest.
Hi, I'm Dan Smith. Thank you guys for tuning in with this special interview about two time travelers. Today we learned about 19th century realism